Hello and welcome to our brief guidance on how to interpret your young person's report. So the reports, our standard reports, look like this. There's an awful lot of information there, so I'm going to try and pull it apart bit by bit just to explain what the various bits mean and how you can interpret it to decide how your young person is getting on at Ashby School. So I'm just going to start at the top where you'll see the attendance and behaviour points. So if we just look across at the right hand side to begin with, you can see the totals of positive and negative points that your young person has received. Now it's worth bearing in mind when you're looking at these that we try and be as positive as we can here at Ashby School. So we really do try and catch students being good and reward them for being good, as well as obviously picking them up when they're not being so good. So those positive points that you can see, we give out at approximately a ratio of 10 positive points for every 1 negative point. So the positive points are for things like being helpful in a lesson, making a good contribution, all the good things which we would expect to see in lessons. And the negative points, we go through our process where students get a verbal warning and then they go onto our behaviour system and get a B1 or B2. Where that's happened, then you'll see that as counted as an incident on the negative report. I'm just going to switch across to the left hand side where you can see the attendance, unauthorised absence and the number of lates. So obviously late is self-explanatory, how many times that child has been late to school in the academic year so far, and the attendance is the attendance, just obviously how often they've been at school out of the possible number of opportunities. Now just focusing in on that attendance, and I say I need to make the link here between attendance and academic success. The two things are really strongly linked. This is the real data from our 2025 leavers and the GCSE grades that they achieved. I've grouped them into 3 different cohorts here, and you can see on the right hand side that actually the students that attended over 95% of the time that they were with us at Ashby School actually achieved an average a little over a grade 5, which is really good, really positive for their futures. And if they're then the next cohort that attended between 90 and 95, you can see that has actually dropped the GCSE outcomes by a whole grade. Okay, so even if we drop to 90, 92, 93%, we find that that costs about a grade on every GCSE that the student sits. And students with attendance less than 90%, we found their average grade for that cohort of students has dropped right the way down to 3. So one of the most important things we can do to help a young person be successful at school is to help them to attend. Now obviously we do understand that sometimes there are unavoidable absences. Students are genuinely ill, have accidents, all sorts of things. However, it's those cases of when the student's got the sniffles, not feeling particularly well. If we really can encourage the students to come to school, that's great. So we'd be aiming for 95% plus in that attendance figure. Okay, the next thing we need to talk about is the target academic profiles. So you can see those on the report for each subject. Now where these come from, they are based on the Key Stage 2 SAT scores that the students achieved at the end of Year 6. It's far too early, we feel, to set GCSE targets in any meaningful way. However, we do want to check on the academic process of students to check that they are making the sort of progress we would expect for someone with their ability as demonstrated by their Key Stage 2 SAT scores. So we set them to one of these 4 academic profiles: excelling, flourishing, securing or developing. And we loosely associate these just to give an indication of what sort of GCSE grades each group might get at the end of Year 11. So you'll notice they are overlapping very deliberately. I say it's far too early to make accurate predictions, but we just give that idea so parents are aware. Okay, so when you look down at the main body of the report in terms of their progress and the academic side of things, you can see each student in each subject will have a target profile as just described. In some instances, such as art, drama and PE, it's not appropriate to base a academic profile on Key Stage 2 maths and English stats. So we don't try and do that. So that's why you will see sometimes not applicable in that case. Then we need to assign our current academic profiles just to indicate how the student is getting on at the moment. Now, to do that, our staff use what we call a curriculum checkpoint. These suggest what a student should know, understand, and should be able to do at this point in their education. So it really is what's expected at the moment of a student for each of those target profiles we spoke about. So if their current profile, what they're doing at the moment, matches the target profile, then that means they're making the expected progress. They're showing us that they can do, understand, and know the things that would be expected for someone of their academic ability. However, if the current profile is above, then that would demonstrate above expected progress, as is the case for this student here. On two of their subjects, food and history, they're making above expected progress. If their current profile was below their target profile, that would show as below expected progress. If the current profile is too below, then that would really be a cause for concern, and that would be highlighted on the report as a cause for concern. Now, if you want to see the curriculum checkpoints to see where these decisions have been made, then you just need to click on the blue underlined subject headings, and that will take you to directly to the curriculum checkpoint that was used. So for example, if I was to click on the computer science one, the computer science one would take me to this curriculum checkpoint. Now there's an awful lot of information here, and you can see for each of the headings, developing, securing, flourishing and excelling, you can see exactly what will be expected in each area. So if your child has, for example, securing as their current profile, you could be able to look down here and see what the teacher has said that they are able to do. But also you could look at what is the next one up and look at what would be required for them to make it onto that next grade. What are the sort of things they would need to be able to do? Okay, the other thing that is reported is attitudes to learning, and we base this on our 3Rs values. Our 3Rs values of resilience, respect and responsibility. We know students who can develop those three things are going to be really successful in school and actually are very likely to have all the skills and characteristics that they need to be successful in life. Now, if you click on the bottom of the report on the blue link, it will bring up this page, and this is the page that our teaching staff have actually used to allocate those 3Rs levels to the students. So in each case, you can look down and see for respect, responsibility and resilience, you're able to look down and see what sort of attributes a student needs to be showing to be awarded those different levels. Now, our expectation is that all students should be meeting this often level. So that will be our expectation. Students who are doing the right sort of things will get often. We reserve the always just so we can demonstrate where a student is going above and beyond. So to get an always is a really good achievement. That is showing that that student is really showing our core values well in their lesson in that subject. Now, if the student gets sometimes, that shows that there is obviously some room for improvement and some improvement needed to show the sort of levels and values that we would expect. And if we get a rarely, then that means that the student is well off and needs to make some steps to improve. And you can see by looking at the chart exactly what they should be showing to reach that sort of often standard or the always gold standard. Okay, so if we pull all that together into a report, I can look down this one, for example, and I can see that in computer science, the student has got a target profile of developing. They're currently on that developing for their current academic profile, which means the progress is expected. And actually, they're meeting all our expectations because we've got often in each of the 3Rs values. However, if we were to go down to maths, for example, we can see that actually the student's academic profile is as expected. However, there's clearly some room for improvement within the attitudes. They've only got sometimes for showing respect and sometimes for accepting responsibility. However, they have got always builds resilience. So this young person is showing really good resilience in maths, obviously able to stick at a task, even when it's difficult. However, they're not always being respectful to staff and their peers, and they're not taking the responsibility they would need to. So I hope that's given you a real flavour for what the reports show and how you can get the most information out of your reports. Okay, so I'd just like to say thank you very much for listening and I wish you all the best. Thank you.